Brett, you're going to do the Western Investment
Yeah,
Company, so you might as well just
more
continue
West.
talking.
Yeah, just more Western
Yeah,
Canada.
all West.
That is what it is. And this, the great name for this too, Western Investment Company. Perfect.
It's yes, of Canada,
And it is based in
Western.
Calgary, which is where I'm at. Just throw that out there as
You can
well.
go visit them.
Exactly. That's, you never know.
You could go to a Foothills Creamery, right?
Yeah, I
Although
could.
that's a small part of the
It's
business,
a
I
small
think,
part.
very
So
small.
we'll get into it. So, like Ryan was just saying, they are a private equity company. So they have four underlying private companies at its time in its portfolio: Fortress Insurance Company, Glass Masters Auto Glass, Golden Healthcare, and Foothills Creamery. It is symbol WI on the TSX Ventures at 58 cents a share and a $17.2 million market cap with a slight dividend yield of 0.86% at this time. For companies structured like Western Investment, the financials are generally structured a bit different from when you would usually see, as they are generally relying on equity income compared to you'll just have consolidated income, which is what you're probably used to seeing. And it'll be a bit different for other financial companies, of course. But you need to look at their financials a bit differently than your standard company. So for 2023, the company had 1.8 million in income from equity investments, an increase of 46% from 2022. So that's really the income which the four prior companies, which I mentioned, come into what their ownership share, Western Investment Canada's ownership share gives them. So they got 1.8 million from those companies. And then they have their corporate expenses on top of that, which lower Western Investments Canada's income to $200,000. So to break down the financials a bit further, we need to look at the underlying companies. Western Investment owns 55.3% of Glassmasters, 25 to 30% of Golden Healthcare, 49.5% of Foothills Creamery, and 28.5% of Fortress Insurance for 2023. I'll get into that. It changed a bit since these results. Golden Healthcare's range, it has a range because Western Investment holds 30% of three Saskatchewan senior care homes. Brennan is unfortunately not in one of those quite yet, but maybe soon. And then 25% of Golden Healthcare Management, and then groups them for earnings. The following figures are based on 100% of the underlying companies, and you'll see this a lot for these equity type investment companies, is they'll break down what their share is, but then they'll give the full results, or at least a group of results for their underlying companies at 100%. So you need to be aware, because you'll see sometimes they'll quote in press releases 100% of the revenue, and you'll have people take that as they got 100% of the revenue when they only own 10, 15% of the company. And you need to be cautious of that for any of these equity holding companies. But the majority of the company's net income comes from Glassmaster. They had net income as well as promissory note, which can be continued in perpetuity. And this, they just call that, they group into one investment income, and that it was 1.9 million, growing from the prior year's 1.5 million. And revenue grew as well for the 100% of business at 21.3%, and effectively doubling the non-interest income aspect of that investment. Golden Healthcare had net income of $150,000, up from a slight loss in the prior year. Foothills Creamery also performed well during the past year, flipping to an income of $789,000 from a loss of $1.8 million on the back of growing revenue at 8.3%. Last but certainly not least, Fortress Insurance increased their net income of $719,000 from a loss of $383,000. Gross written premiums, which are from the insurance contracts they write, grew 26.4% from 22.4 million or to 22.4 million. So overall, strong year for the four businesses. You saw growth across the board, which is always good to see. You saw top line, the respective top lines all grow, as well as bottom lines. However, the company is undergoing a massive change, to say the least. The company is receiving at least 20 million investment from Paul Rivett, founder of Tavir Capital Corp, which could potentially increase his investment stake to 23 million, depending on their choice. In tandem, the company is receiving rights for existing shareholders to purchase shares at 40 cents a piece, which could add another 30.2 million in capital. Remember, the market cap for this company is only 17.2 million. So you're adding upwards of 23 million plus another 30 million. It could be a massive change in corporate structure or capital structure, as well as corporate structure. And even if there are no rights executed, the investment from just Paul Rivett is larger than the company's entire market cap at this time. In addition, Paul Rivett will become president and CEO, while the former CEO, Scott Tenness, which is actually a Canadian senator, will be appointed chairman of the board for 5 years. Paul Rivett is interested in the insurance side of the business and that will really become the focus of the business going forward. As well, the company is required in part of this transaction to acquire 51% of the underlying shares for Fortress Insurance, and it has since secured 59% of the shares conditional on the closure of that transaction. As a part of the potential acquisition of Fortress share rights for the Western Investment shares it can be either paid in cash or voting rights in Western Investment at 40 cents a share, just like the underlying rights that are issued to shareholders, which could potentially add upwards of another 30 million shares to Western's count. So we're seeing just a complete change in their capital structure as well as their corporate structure during this time. There's significant change, to say the least. The company is, however, planning to still keep a hold of Golden Healthcare, Foothills Premier, and Glassmasters as long-term investments at this time. So you're not seeing them clean out their other investments just to bring in insurance. They are at least still holding on to them for now. Further, the company does set out some targets for Fortress. Gross premiums written, so that's effectively the top line for the insurance companies. You can use it it is different, but you can use that as a top line kind of. They were planning to increase it to 100 million annually by 2028 through both organic and inorganic growth, ergo acquisitions, which is very substantial from 2023's 22.4 million gross premiums written, effectively 4.5 times what they were doing. And so you can see they're planning to massively increase their insurance business. Whether they can do it or not is really the question. So concluding, the company is undergoing significant changes, to say the least. The trailing valuations at this time are effectively meaningless, but they're not exactly cheap. You're looking at 85, 90 times on a price to earnings ratio. Obviously not cheap, but quite a few of the companies are just near that break-even point. So you do get those big fluctuations in price to earnings or really any other valuation metrics when it is near that zero line. So it's not saying it's completely overvalued, hopeless type of company. It is growing. The underlying businesses, they've grown top and bottom line during this time. But that's not really the question which you want to be looking at this time is those businesses. You want to be looking forward. So you need to look at the complete capital structure change, whether or not this transaction even goes through. I would say it's very likely, but there is always a risk when you're looking at these big transactions, acquisitions, M&As, any of those sorts of things. Even if the market has it priced in at 95, 100% chance of happening in its price, sometimes they do fall apart. For whatever reason, it could be capital falls out, a death, anything. It is not 100%. So I would personally like to wait through for the transaction to at least close and then further see the progression of Fortress, see if they can actually build up to that 100 million gross underwriting, see some progress there, see them deploy the capital because they're coming into a lot of capital. The amount obviously varies depending on the rights executed. If they can actually deploy that in insurance business. Because if the transaction goes through, they can't deploy the capital effectively, you're stuck with a dud still. Transaction falls apart, you're stuck with a dud, or at least a fit in the company in a different form than what you would have expected. So at this time, I'd really wait and monitor the company for some progress in the transaction as well as after the transaction.
Yeah, I think at this point, it's a good summary on the company, but you're betting on the new business, essentially the new business going forward and management. And, we'd like to bet on some cash flow existing in the operation. And we need that as a basic premise in any investment that we have. It's just not here yet to the degree that we'd like to see.
Mm-hmm.
And the certainty isn't there yet either on it going forward.
No, and that's really what I mean is I don't think it's a bad company. I'm not going to lambast it or anything. They obviously have some good the individual companies that at least have some cash flow behind them. But whether or not they can do it in this structure and then build out the insurance is really the question.
I mean, these companies we love to monitor, and if they hit an inflection point in the business, or they're not getting any coverage and they're trading at valuations that they indicate they could be a good long-term situation. That's why we keep a book on a ton of these companies. But until we see, it hasn't checked off all our boxes yet, is what we'd say. And I think you went through that well. All right, Brennan or Aaron, did you have any comments on that? Or we're moving on, right?
You're on.
Yeah.
I think I put him to sleep there.
Yeah. Vitreous glass, Brennan.
Yes. So sticking on the Western Canada theme.
Ooh.
So we got this
Go
question.
west, young man. Go west.
Yeah, exactly. So we got